Okay, on 12.1, we're going to be adding, subtracting, and multiplying polynomials. So if you don't remember, a polynomial is a sum of monomials. Okay, so we're going to first look at adding and subtracting. So this first example, we're simplifying the expression. Always pay attention to your operation in between your two sets of parentheses. Notice it's a plus sign. Also notice there is nothing directly in front of the parentheses, so you can actually rewrite this without the parentheses. And then you're just combining your like terms. So remember, like terms have the same variable and the same exponent. So if they do not have the same variable and exponent, you're not going to be able to add them. So I'm going to start out with my 6x cubed. So I would be looking for something else that has an x cubed, and I do have something. So I add them, and that gives me 8x cubed. And by the way, remember when you add and subtract, you do not change the exponent. So I'm going to go ahead and mark those out. I combined them. And then I'm going to go to my next degree, which is the exponent. So I have an x squared. Notice there's not another x squared, so I'm going to bring down, since it's positive, I'm bringing down a plus sign, x squared. And then I have a negative 5x plus 10x, which would give me a positive, so plus 5x. We're not able to add any of those, so this would be my final answer. So that's adding polynomials, so you're just combining your like terms. Okay, example 2, pay attention to your operation in between. There's a subtraction. Since there is a subtraction, this is just like having a negative 1 there. So I would need to distribute that. I didn't have to do that up here because it was just a positive 1, and anything times a positive 1 is just itself. So I will have to distribute this subtraction sign to all of the terms. That's the most common mistake with the subtraction ones. So I'm going to go ahead and just rewrite my first one because there's nothing in front of those sets of parentheses. And then I'm going to distribute this negative 1 to all of these. So that would become minus 4x cubed minus 2x, and then plus 7. So you have to distribute that subtraction sign. It's just like a negative 1 in front. When you multiply something times a negative 1, it just changes the sign of that term. So now I'm going to look at my like terms. So I have an x cubed. Notice I have another x cubed. Always pay attention to your sign in front. So this is a 1x cubed minus 4x cubed, which would make negative 3x cubed. And then I'm looking for, next would be an x squared, but notice there's not an x squared, which is fine. Then I would look for an x. Notice I have a negative 2x, and there's not another x term. So that would just be a minus 2x. And then I have a negative 5 and a positive 7, which would make a positive 2, so plus 2. So there would be my final answer. So make sure with subtraction that you distribute that negative 3. Okay, so now I want you to pause the video and I want you to work on number 1 and number 2. And when you're finished, then you can press play again and then check your answer. So I'm going to go ahead and write the answers. So on 1, you would get negative 5x cubed minus 5x minus 9. And then the answer to number 2 would be 5x cubed minus 10x squared plus x minus 5. Okay, so now we're going to go over to the multiplication. So we're going to simplify the expression. The difference between what we were just doing and what we're doing now is, notice there is no operation in between your two sets of parentheses, which means you're multiplying. So whenever I multiply, you're having to multiply every single term of the first by every single term of the second. So I'm going to need to multiply 2x times x squared. When you multiply, you add the exponents. So that would be 2x to the third. And I need to continue on with distributing this 2x. So 2x times negative 2x is a negative 4x squared. So you multiply the numbers, you add your exponents on the x's. Continue distributing the 2x to the 3, so that would be a positive 6x. And now I also have to look at this number, which is a negative 9, and distribute that to all three. So negative 9 times x squared is a negative 9x squared. Negative 9 times a negative 2x is a positive 18x. And negative 9 times 3 is a negative 27. Now this looks very similar to what we had on the last two examples. Now we're just combining our like terms. So I'm going to start out with my 2x cubed. So I'm looking for another x cubed. Notice there is not one, so I'm just rewriting 2x cubed. Then I'm looking at x squared, so negative 4x squared. Notice there is another x squared. It's negative 9x squared, so that would be negative 13x squared. And again, when you're adding and subtracting, you don't change your exponents like when you're multiplying. So those are combined. Next, I would go to the x's, so positive 6x and positive 18x, which would make 24x. And then I have the last term, which is just negative 27. So there would be my final answer. So this is multiplying. So it's like distributing, but you're having to distribute multiple terms. Okay, example 4, we're going to simplify the expression. Notice we just have a monomial out in front, and we have no operation in between it and the parentheses, so we're multiplying them together. So I would need to multiply. So I'm going to have to distribute. So 4x times x squared would be 4x to the third, because we're multiplying, we add the exponents. 4x times 12x would be 48x squared, because the x to the first times the x to the first is the x to the squared. And then 4x times negative 5 is a negative 20x. After we distribute, notice none of these are like terms because they have different exponents, so this would be the final answer. Okay, now I want you to pause the video. I want you to work on number 3, number 4, and then you can check your answer. So number 3, you would get x squared minus 5x. It doesn't have a number in front. I do have a 3 here, so I would need to distribute. That would be plus 3x cubed minus 18x squared plus 3. Combining your like terms, you would get negative 17x squared. And then I'm going to, in front of it, put my x cubed. So 3x cubed. So those I combined. I forgot the cube first, so there it is. I wasn't able to combine it with anything. And then I'm bringing down my minus 5x because there's not another term that has an x, and then the plus 3. So there would be your final answer. Okay, the last one, simplifying this expression, notice it says a squared. That means it's twice. There's 2 of them. So I'm going to take 4x squared and distribute it to 4x squared. So that would be 16x to the 4th. 4x squared times 3, negative 3 is a negative 12x squared. Then go to the negative 3. Negative 3 times 4x squared is a negative 12x squared. And negative 3 times a negative 3 is a positive 9. So really it was called FOIL. Really you were using FOIL since you were multiplying a binomial times a binomial, but it's very similar to what we had on example 3 up at the top. Okay, so we're combining our like terms. We have a 16x to the 4th that we're not able to add with anything else. And then we can combine our x squareds, which would be negative 24x squared, and then the plus 9. So don't forget, whenever it says a binomial and then squared, you write it twice and then work it out that way. Okay, so this was just a review of adding, subtracting, multiplying polynomials. We'll get into factoring on the next lesson. If you have any questions, please let me know.